Welcome to the Packaging Etcetera Podcast, where we will discuss all things packaging and some things not. We will hear from professionals across all areas of the industry: design, engineering, manufacturing, and many more. We will learn about packaging trends, new technologies, and cutting-edge innovations. This podcast is all about showcasing our favorite parts of the industry, the people, and giving them a platform to share their stories and their knowledge of packaging. Let's take this journey together. And now, your host, Matt Mulvey.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my first episode of the Packaging Etcetera Podcast. Thank you for giving me a listen. In prepping for this first episode, I was originally thinking I would give a 12 to 15 minute monologue about me. It sounds painful, right? And about what I'm hoping to accomplish with this podcast. The more I thought about it, and the more I worked on a quote-unquote script, the less I liked the idea. Then it hit me. Most of the podcasts I've enjoyed listening to so far have included at least one interviewer and one guest. So what better way to kickstart this new passion project of mine than to record an interview of me? And who better than my beautiful wife, Joanna, to be the interviewer? She's had a front row seat to most of my career anyway. Had to deal with most of the travel, the hassles, the late nights, and early morning phone calls. So for the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm willing to be your punching bag to give my listeners a little flavor for who I am, where I've come from, and where I'm headed, and what you might expect out of this podcast. With that, allow me to introduce my bride, Joanna Mulvey. Joanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Super excited for your podcast and absolutely looking forward to kicking it off. So I guess, any good place to start. Let's start off with the easy one. Tell me how you came up with the whole idea to have this podcast.
Well, I figured, why not me? Why couldn't I do a podcast? I guess it was about 6 months ago, fall time frame. And I was kind of tired of listening to music. I have a 45-minute commute to and from work each day. And just, the drive gets kind of monotonous. You try to find a way to pass the time and needed something different, something other than the same old music I had been listening to for years. And just kind of decided to dip into podcasts and give it a try. And, I figured, it's something new. It's an interesting format. Maybe I can make that time a little more value added.
So I guess you now regularly listen to podcasts. Any ones that you are your favorites, you continuously listen to?
Yeah, the first one I dipped into was, Joe Rogan Experience, basically for name power. Obviously, he's a big name. He's probably one of the biggest out there when it comes to podcasts. I also like the fact that he's willing to interview pretty much anybody. He gets political. He talks science. He talks comedy. He's kind of all over the place. And I guess that kind of appeals to where my head is at, in the morning when I'm driving to work and when I'm driving home. Sometimes I just need a good laugh. Sometimes, they're talking some fun science stuff, Brian Cox, Neil deGrasse Tyson, things like that. Sometimes they get political. But, no matter who he interviews, I seem to find some humor in some of his episodes. And so that kind of, keeps my interest for the drive.
Interesting. So what other podcasts interest you that you normally would go to?
Well, I love the outdoors. And so, I dipped into the backpacking podcast, listening to people tell stories about experiences on the trail, maybe picking up a few pointers here and there. And then I started listening to some of the established packaging podcasts in the industry. People of Packaging with Adam Peake and Ted Tate. That's a big one. Let's Talk Packaging. And then, the genesis for this idea also kind of came from some events that I've run recently. So last fall, I ran the second annual Packaging Roundtable discussion at Rutgers. This event's topic was on trends in pharmaceutical and medical device packaging, sponsored by the New Jersey Packaging Executives Club, who, hint, hint, will be one of my future guests. And I served as the moderator of that event. And, so we had panelists from big pharma and packaging machinery companies come in and speak to the kids about trends in the industry and be available for, ad hoc questions and answers at the end. But the more I moderated that event, now doing it the second time, I felt like, hey, I'm kind of getting a feel for, I don't have to be the one providing the information and providing the content. I could be the one that's extracting that value add content, and that kind of parlayed into the podcast idea of being a podcast host.
Interesting. So basically, you're saying you woke up one morning, which doesn't quite surprise me at all. You woke up one morning and decided that you're going to start a podcast. Is that how it happened?
Yes and no. So my involvement with with different organizations, we're always looking for ways to kind of get the word out. So, I'm involved with the Rutgers packaging program, and I'm on the industrial advisory board for packaging as an alumni and as an industry member. And, we'd been talking about how to create more awareness for packaging in general, how to try to attract more students into the program. And I kind of came up with an idea of, hey, what if we could leverage a social media influencer, somebody that's already got a big voice in the industry that might be willing to help us out. And we kind of talked about that for a few minutes as a team. And collectively, we really couldn't come up with anybody that we thought, already had a big footprint in the packaging industry from a social media influencer perspective that wouldn't have been a cold call coming from us, somebody that already had ties to Rutgers. And so, that kind of is where the idea started, where I said, maybe I'll just do it. Why not? Right. And that, with the experiences I was having with the roundtable discussions, yeah, sure. The idea kind of popped up, randomly, but, over time, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, why not? I can do this.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. And I'm sure you've met a lot of people during your career. So with that being said, is there anybody you'd like to mention or, give a shout out to, say thank you to?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the first people I spoke to about podcasting, Amanda Averill, she's with Cover and Associates. She has a STEM podcast. I think it's called What Do You Do? I was supposed to be going to an IOPP networking event for the Philly chapter last fall timeframe, I want to say, and I couldn't make it. So I kind of went through the invite list to see who I missed out on, and she was one of the invitees. And when I saw that she has a podcast, I reached out, and we've spoken a couple times and kind of collaborated on ideas for me getting my podcast off the ground, and for her, continuing her efforts. So definitely a shout out for her. Andrew Murata, he's been hugely influential. He's got several podcasts. He's a published author. Met him actually through our mutual friends, Tommy and Eileen Grimes. Tommy put us together, and he's a retired NCAA Division I basketball ref. So he's got some interesting stories there. And he was able to give me a lot of advice on how to get this set up, and, recommendations for advertising, and, some critiques on the podcast name and things like that. So had a couple conversations with him. Nicole Carino, would love to mention her. She's the person I had do the voiceover and the intro outro for this podcast. I think she did a great job. So, obviously want to mention her. And last but not least, forgive me, but I have to, give a shout out to you for putting up with my ideas and all these ideas I kick off with a whim.
Well, you definitely love to do that, but that's, what makes you the person that you are, that I love. Let me ask you another question. So you have a lot of interests, obviously, but why specifically packaging podcasts? I mean, especially if you mentioned there's a whole bunch out there already.
Well, it's kind of a passion project for me. And I think it kind of resonates through a lot of people in the packaging industry that, I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy the dynamic of the packaging industry, and I'm fascinated, with packaging in general. Since I learned about it over 25 years ago, I know I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I wanted to use this platform to learn about other packaging professionals, their experiences, their passions, hopefully, talking about some value added topics that, listeners, can gather some good information from. And obviously a platform to help the Rutgers Packaging Program and New Jersey Packaging Executives Club.
So, that leads me to my very interesting question of how on earth did you get into packaging? I mean, a lot of people don't even know what that is. I mean, what put you into that major?
Yeah, so interesting. I was originally a civil engineering major at Rutgers in the engineering school, and I wasn't really feeling that curriculum or that career path, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I actually originally wanted to be an architect, and then architect became civil engineering. And then I was walking through the student center at Bush campus, where the engineering school is, and I bumped into Jack Ramus. He was the managing director of the packaging program at the time, and basically offered me free pizza and soda. Jerry Maguire moment, right? You had me at free instead of you had me at hello. So yeah, free food and drinks. I went in and he was basically giving an info session on packaging. And, as most people, the way it works, when you start explaining, I'm a packaging engineer, they immediately think, oh, well, you make boxes for a living. And I had the same moment, right? I had the same thought. But then the more I listened to him, the more I understood just how big and all encompassing the packaging industry is. I had that light bulb moment, as I like to call it, where it was like, oh, wow, hold on a minute. There's so much more to this than I originally thought. So obviously I got involved right from that point. He signed me up for the intro class. Within 6 months of finishing the intro class, I had already won a scholarship and I had an internship in the field. And I was like, well, okay, this is pretty interesting. This is, the topics are interesting, but it's also just how involved and how local it is. Packaging is huge globally, but in the tri-state area, there's so many opportunities, for an engineer in the packaging industry. So I really felt like there'd be some strategic opportunities there for me as well. And then once I graduated, I would go back on campus and I would talk to freshman engineering students that hadn't declared yet. And I would run my $20 bill experiment. I would hold up a 20. And back in those days, that was a lot of money for me. And I would say this $20 bill belongs to the first person that can give me a tangible physical product that you can purchase that doesn't involve or require packaging in some way, shape, or form. And kids would just yell out, right? They'd come up with different ideas, but I was always able to figure out a way to tie that product back to some form of packaging, whether it's protective, distribution, you name it. And so obviously to this day, I haven't given up that 20, but it was a great thought process to help people understand just how big and all encompassing the industry really is. And I do know for a fact that several students from those lectures signed up, which was a great moment for me because I knew that I was able to get through to some people.
It really is kind of amazing that people really don't realize that packaging is really in everything. And, I know a little bit, tiny bit, because I worked in that department a long time ago as well, but it's just amazing. So you found packaging through free pizza and soda. Amazing. Obviously, it interested you, so you continued well and you graduated. And what happened next?
Well, like I mentioned, I got my first internship with TCP Reliable. TCP is temperature controlled products. They're now known as Cryopack up in Edison, not far from campus. And I was working in their testing lab, working in cold chain packaging. And at the time, I didn't realize just how important cold chain was, especially to the, pharmaceutical industry where I work now. So it really was more strategic than just a paycheck and experience. From there, I went to Johnson & Johnson Consumer Products. I did a co-op with them. And I worked for Ken Patterson. He was my manager, my direct line manager there. And he took me on my first business trip, which was down to Harrisonburg, Virginia. Kind of a spur of the moment thing. I will say that his driving skills are unique. If NASCAR ever opened up a track for pickup trucks, I think he'd be in. But he got us down there in record time and got a ticket for the facility and went out for dinner with the sales rep. So eye-opening experience from that perspective. And then I worked at Hartz Mountain Pet Products up in Secaucus. And then I also worked for Dr. Ramus for a brief period. He had a consulting business and he had me doing some work for him as well. So I really got a lot of experience before I ever graduated, which is something I always encourage students in any field, if they have the opportunity, to try to work an internship or co-op or multiple before they graduate. So after I graduated, I worked for a lot of big companies. So first job out of school was L'Oreal, and then Pfizer Consumer Healthcare. I worked as a packaging contractor for a couple of years. Worked, ironically enough, talk about coming full circle. I worked for a box manufacturer. So, assuming that packaging engineers make boxes for a living, yes, I actually did make boxes for a living for a while with Temple Inland and International Paper. I worked for Catalent for a time on a pretty interesting project there, Church and Dwight, IP, International Paper a second time. And then in 2021, I opened up a consulting business, which I am now 5 years in business with that. And then last year, I took a job with Renaissance Lakewood.
Sounds like an amazing career. But just like, tell us about some bigger projects that you've completed, because, again, that kind of tells people, the packaging, world and, some interesting stuff that you worked on.
So, yeah, the first big project that my portfolio project, if you will, was when I was at Pfizer Consumer, and they launched the Listerine Pocket Mist product, which was a follow up to the Pocket Packs, which was revolutionary in the fresh breath industry, and so this device, which is still in the market now, and they've launched additional products in that same format. I handled the design of all the secondary and distribution packaging. So the blister card, the tray design, the shippers, the pallet patterns, all of that. The labels and the labeling process at the co-packer. That was all me. So that was kind of a pride moment where every time I go into the store and I'd see them hanging on the displays up by the register or sitting on the shelf, it was always kind of a cool moment to say, hey, I did that. I worked on a project to assemble several high-speed production lines, multi-lane stick pack lines. So stick pack, if you think, like the, granule powder of the, iced tea, lemonade type drinks where you rip it open and it's a single use, mixing with water. That type of a product for an OTC. With cartoner, check weighers, bundlers, semi-auto case erectors, and tape sealers. And that project is really more my wheelhouse now because I'm really more on the equipment side of the packaging industry versus the component design. Worked on an aerosol capper machine. That was a pretty interesting one. That was a fun one. That got to go out to Chicago for a couple of trips, of course, in the dead of winter, so it was a little bit cold. Did a custom designed twin pack labeler machine. That was another fun one. And then I've also supported commercialization of some semi-automatic packaging equipment and automatic packaging equipment for auto-injector devices and, sterile injectables. Development of multi-stage assembly parameters for, sterile injectable product, safety device, and then an end-of-line packaging to, get product out to distribution centers and eventually to pharmacies or doctors' offices or wherever their final location was.
Very cool. What drives you in life? What are you proud of personally and professionally?
So my first big moment was earning my Eagle Scout when I was 17. I came from a very pro scouting family. And, I worked really hard to get there. So getting across that finish line was a big one for me. In high school, I got an invitation to a talent evaluation by the Kansas City Royals. I was absolutely overmatched and out of my league, but, being a 16-year-old playing ball for just a day with some of these guys was a really cool experience. So that was probably the highlight of my sports career. Getting married, becoming a father, stepfather, I'm proud of those things. I'm, not trying to kiss up or anything.
Well, you're awesome at all those things.
Well, thank you. Professionally, I would say, establishing and running a consulting business for the last 5 years. Well, I'm in my fifth year now. Earning my lifetime certified packaging professional through IOPP. And then about 2 years ago, I got my project management professional certification. So,
yes, I remember all the long studying.
Yeah, I'll probably find something else to dip into soon, but just focusing on work and executing right now.
What about the consulting business? So, tell us a little bit about that. Your company.
So, I always figured I would eventually get into a consulting type role. I figured it would be later in my career, but late 2020, I was forced into a little bit of a career pivot. And the stars just aligned. One of the things that I preach to the students when I go to Rutgers to support the program, is networking. I cannot stress enough how important networking is in my personal opinion anyway. And it was through networking and industry contacts that led me to, an organization that was looking for some support, some external support, engineering for, packaging in the pharmaceutical industry, but they were also looking for some process continuous improvement initiatives. And, I kind of checked all those boxes, and a full-time job was not in the cards at the time, but it was an opportunity for me to create an LLC and incorporate and support them as a consultant. And it just kind of grew from there. So it really was a great opportunity for me, and I grabbed on with both hands, and been thinking about riding out that consulting for the rest of my career. At least on a part-time basis, and who knows when I'll get back to it. In a more full-time capacity. I mean, who knows? We'll see how things go.
I don't know if your listeners know, but 2025 also brought you a very exciting new opportunity. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. So kind of another one of those things that I figured I would do later in life, was, supporting the packaging program at Rutgers as an adjunct professor. And, it's a little over a month in now. They reached out and had a need for one class, and they asked if I would take it over. And I have to say, I'm very honored that they reached out to me. And, I said, listen, my answer is yes. I said, but I have two bosses I need to get permission from first. And, both of them, you being, the most important one, didn't hesitate. What was that?
I thought me being both of them.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Let's go with that. You're both of them.
All right. So, are you planning anything else? Because you really don't have much time, and you still have that honey-do list to take care of.
Yeah, I know. I'll get to it. I promise. No, I think I've taken on enough new adventures recently. So let's try to get to some type of a level status before I start looking at my next thing.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, maybe deep breath is good. So tell me, who has been the biggest influencers in your career? Because I know, I'm sure you've met so many awesome people through that time. Like, who would be your top three?
Yeah, definitely way too many people to mention. But if I had to go with a top three, I mentioned Jack Ramis, Dr. Ramis. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful mentor, really, really cared about his students. And anybody that was at Rutgers at the time while he was there was the better for it. And I'm sure that, hey, you never know, maybe I'll try to pull them into a podcast episode in the future, but I'm sure that they would agree. He was just a great person. He really cared. Quick story about him. His tradition for graduating seniors at Rutgers in the packaging program, he would take us on a class trip to New York City on his dime. He paid for everything, and he would take us to, amongst other places, St. Patrick's Cathedral. And that was actually the first time I ever went to St. Patrick's. And walked through, and both of us being of Christian, Catholic background, he took us through into the gift shop, and he said, pick something out, and he ended up buying me a cross that had been and I'm not going to remember the name, but had been blessed by the local cardinal, and was in the gift shop available, and he purchased that for me, and I still have that cross. I have it in my dresser drawer. It's just one of those things that kind of reminds me of him. And then I would say number 2 would be Kumar Nadavadi. Kumar, if you're listening, I want to say hello.
Always love a good shout out to Kumar,
Yeah, so I actually met Kumar because he was the scholarship chairperson in NJPEC when I was awarded a scholarship at Rutgers. And he tried to hire me directly out of school. But I really didn't think I wanted to work in pharmaceuticals, believe it or not. I really didn't think it was going to fit what I was envisioning for my career. And so I respectfully declined. And then 2 years later, he had a new role in his department at Pfizer and hired me into it. And it was exactly the kind of role that I was looking for. So, within 2 years, I kind of flipped on my outlook for my career. And it was a great decision because I loved that job. And it also brought me to meet you. That's where you and I met. So thank you, Kumar, for that.
And my shout out.
Yeah, there you go. And then, even though it's a collective group, I would definitely mention the leadership team I worked with at International Paper, specifically Peggy Giuliano. Peggy, she has a great backstory, working in that industry and becoming a plant general manager. Most people kind of came up through sales or operations, and she came up through HR. So being a woman in a predominantly male-driven role in that industry for as long as she was, and the career path that she followed to get there, really kind of makes a great backstory. Actually, probably make a really good podcast episode. So, Peg, if you're listening, I may be reaching out. And you know what? I just realized all 3 of them, I've successfully gotten inducted into the New Jersey Packaging Executives Club Hall of Fame. I just thought about that. Kind of interesting.
Well, that's a nice group of people you just mentioned. What's next for 2025? I mean, besides, you're already quite busy, but what's the mantra?
Settle in. I think that's probably the mantra for 2025. Looking back on my life, it's kind of a poster child for upset conditions. And I kind of get the feeling that I crave upset conditions. Knowing that what I like to do at work, being an engineer, I'm kind of used to dealing with fires, putting out fires on a regular basis. And I feel like I kind of I crave those upset conditions. Status quo kind of gets boring for me. So settle in professionally is definitely, part of my 2025 goals. Obviously, exploring this podcast idea and kind of seeing where this goes. I just started, I'm almost a year in now with Renaissance. They're a CDMO in the pharma med device space. Great company. Yeah, even greater people. I love the people I work with. They're really, really good people. So, need to settle in there as well. There's a lot of things coming up that I'll be working on that I'm looking forward to kind of getting my feet wet and, learning some new technologies, and should be interesting. But, full-time job, consulting on the side, not really doing a ton with that right now. Obviously the podcast, becoming a recent adjunct professor at Rutgers, then volunteering with the NJPEC, the Packaging Advisory Board, plus being, a dad to 3, soon to be 4 wonderful children. So I guess quick shout out to Tyler and Cassie, my future daughter-in-law, Gabrielle and Dylan, and then our 2 crazy dogs, Sammy and Freya. Maybe some grandkids in the not so distant future. So I think
no pressure, there.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure. I think, there's a lot on my plate. So I feel like, settling in, needed to find a level of calm, in my life. Am I capable of that? I don't know. We'll see. I guess, time will tell.
Not. Probably not. So, we talked a lot about packaging. Obviously, it's a packaging podcast, but, what do you want your listeners to know about you personally? Like, what do you like or dislike, things that you enjoy?
I love the outdoors. I love being outside. I feel like I have activities for every season. So wintertime, I love skiing. going on day hikes. I'm not crazy enough to do long distance backpacking in the wintertime. I'm not quite there yet. Summertime, camping, fishing, kayaking, golfing. I kind of have an activity for each season. Remember when the kids were little, just, in a rainstorm, just going outside and just getting soaked in the rain and jumping in puddles and just being goofy. Something about being outdoors for me is very soothing. I would say that's definitely something. I guess we have to get the ugly business out of the way from a sports perspective. I love watching and playing sports. Yankees and Rangers, my local teams. I'm a Celtics fan. It's painful to be a fan of a team from Boston, living in New Jersey. But I grew up during the Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Danny Ainge years, and kind of became a Celtics fan and stayed. Denver Broncos, 1983. We lived out there when I was young for about 2 years, and John Elway had just gotten drafted by the Colts out of Stanford, and then traded to the Broncos, and became a Bronco fan and just stayed a Bronco fan, even though we moved back to New Jersey. Rutgers for obvious reasons. And, my father, I didn't really have much of a choice watching Notre Dame when I was a kid. So kind of grew up being a Notre Dame fan. And ironically enough, I look at that list and our youngest, he would pretty much agree with that entire list. But considering he still lives in this house and we still pay for him, he doesn't have much of a choice.
I was going to say, I don't think he has much choice in his dad.
When he's out on his own, he can root for whoever he wants.
The name of the podcast, Packaging Etcetera. What's really the Etcetera? What does the Etcetera stand for?
So, there are a lot of packaging podcasts out there already, and I felt like I wanted to try to separate. Like I definitely want to talk about the industry. I want to provide value-added content for my listeners and for myself, honestly, because a lot of the names, a lot of the people that I have lined up to interview for future episodes are around topics that I have my own personal curiosity in, and then some, dual purpose where I feel like there's a value add where, I'm not the only one that's going to want to learn about this. So, but at the same time, I also want to, keep it fun and light. And I think that there's definitely an opportunity to speak to people outside of the packaging industry that really still could be interesting, for people to hear about. I definitely want to talk to people that are either small business owners, maybe give them a platform to do some advertising, talking to some nonprofit organizations. I really want to try to, support wherever I can. There's I'm going to forget the author, but there's a quote out there that says, when we all rise when we help others. And, I really want to try to embrace that with this. So the Etcetera is more or less we're going to talk packaging, but, we're going to find some other topics outside of the packaging industry that are maybe just general self-help or just have some fun with this and see where it goes.
I like that concept, actually. So do you have any guests lined up already? Ideas for guests?
Yeah. So, you know me, I'm Captain Spreadsheet, right? So I have my Excel spreadsheet with, hundreds of lines of ideas and thoughts and, middle of the night, moments where I'm going, oh, hey, let me go put that down. That could be interesting. But as far as my first couple of episodes, we're going to talk to Kristen Cupo. She's the newly elected president of NJPEC. So we'll be talking about the club and, her involvement there and where she sees that club going, for the next year under her leadership. We'll talk to Guido Schmitz of Popax about his ventures into molded fiber packaging. My longtime friend Leo Frias of Fariba Pack, we're going to talk to him and learn about what he's got going on at Fariba Pack and talk about some of the trends in the pharmaceutical packaging and machinery industry. And my old professor from Rutgers, Dr. Tom Nosker at Rutgers University, he's not teaching anymore so much as I know. I guess we'll find out when I speak with him. But he's a brilliant man and been in the news recently. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but I want to say he's part of the National Academy of Inventors. I'm going to get it wrong, I promise you. But we'll talk to him about it in more detail. But yeah, I'll let the expert deliver that content.
Yeah. Let him introduce himself. So this has been a lot of fun, actually. Interviewing you. I've never really done that, I don't think. And I'm super excited for your podcast, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit. But do you have any parting words, as an end to our interview?
Yeah, just I guess a thank you to everybody that I've mentioned. There's way too many people to thank. I kind of feel like I just got my Oscar. I'd like to thank my agent. I'd like to thank, but no, there's the list is just way too long. But definitely the people that I've mentioned already, hugely influential in my professional life, personal life, and in my endeavor to get this thing off the ground. So my sincerest thanks to you. To the listeners, dare I say listeners, maybe if I get more than one. If you're still listening, thanks for sticking around for this entire episode. I know it's a long way to go just to learn about me and what this podcast is going to be about. But I'm hoping that I can deliver some content and talk to some interesting people, and who knows, we can all learn together. And listen, I'm always looking to network on LinkedIn. So if you're listening to this, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. If anybody has ideas for topics or suggestions for future guests or future episodes, you can use www.precisionengsolutions.com. Use the contact form. I'd love to hear from you. And I guess, thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate you helping. I think this is definitely a much more interesting way of doing it than me sitting here and just talking for half an hour. I kind of get tired of my own voice. So you've been a welcome addition to the first episode. So thank you for that. And
my pleasure.
I guess with that, we'll sign off. So everybody, bye for now, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Packaging Etcetera podcast. We hope you enjoyed the content and maybe learned something new. If you have ideas for future guests or topics, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to send a connection request on LinkedIn or visit www.precisionengsolutions.com and use the contact form. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us once more on the next episode of the Packaging Etcetera podcast. Until then.